237%, 1969, which was 224%, and 1983 at 227%. And you'll see the note that says 2023 data is preliminary. That's because as of the report this morning, we were at about 140, 150 snow courses that had reported. We still have a couple of days to get that data in to get it closer to the full number of snow courses. And so that number, I've been kind of looking at it every day. It will go from 235% up to 239%. It's fluctuating as new data comes in. We don't expect to get 100% of the snow courses measured, as Sean alluded to this morning. There are conditions, avalanche especially, safety, just logistical conditions that make it impossible to get all the snow courses. Or we have folks that are getting to the snow courses and just physically unable to penetrate through 200 plus inches of snow with all the ice layers. But this number would still be fairly indicative. It is also matching what the statewide snow sensors are showing, so that gives us a lot of confidence. And where we do have the ability to do airborne snow observatory flights, those are active when there's a good weather window. And so that's also giving us more confidence in the state of the snowpack, even if some snow courses won't get measured. So with that, I believe I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Dr. Michael Anderson.
Good afternoon, everybody. Give you a little perspective on quite a year. I have a satellite shot here showing you a little speckled air offshore, which is indicative of some cold air still in place, and that'll be giving way soon as warm up is on its way. Let's go to the next slide. Alrighty, so 23 is continuing a pattern of extremes. So just to give you a sense of how weird the last decade's been, put together this chart looking at temperature, precipitation, and snowpack. And we found the number of dots out at the furthest edge of this chart, either at the lowest or highest 10% of the historical distribution. And boy, we've been sampling a lot there lately, and you can see on temperature, we are consistently always on the warm side. We have yet to find a year that gets on the cool side, even with 2019, 2017 being those big years that are in the wetter extremes there. Normally, we would expect a lot of the years to fall in that expected range, but in the past decade, we've only seen it once. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so Christmas 2022, just to remind you, heading into year 4 of a drought and just about done with the first quarter of the water year, and things were looking pretty grim. Boy, things changed in the second quarter. Let's go to the next slide, and we see that footprint. A lot of those storms are really running that track between San Francisco Bay and San Diego. A lot of heavy precip in that region, a lot of flooding, and a monster snowpack. We do see the far north of the state, usually our wettest part of the state, not so much this year. Some years are like this. They're still wet, it's just not quite as wet and not quite seeing the extent of extremes that have been on this year's storm track. But this very different picture than it was at Christmas. Let's go to the next slide. All right, that temperature-wise, I want to show you. So with all that cold air you've had, and I said, well, by golly, we should be getting down in there. And we see with the Central Coast and the North Lahontan regions, between October and February, don't have the March data in yet, we are actually down in that cooler part, anomalously cool part of the distribution. But everywhere else in the state, just about the median. Middle of the distribution. So even in a big year with a lot of cold air, we have a hard time getting onto the colder side of the distribution, and we have our warmest months ahead. So these numbers will change by the time we get a full year put into place. Let's go to the next slide. All righty, let's look at the outlook because things are indeed changing. These are the spring outlooks. April, May, and June. They were issued in mid-March. They have not yet been updated for the beginning of April. That'll happen later this week. But what we see mostly for California is this springtime equal chances. This is a transition period in the climate system as we start getting a longer daylight. Storm track starts shifting back towards the north. And there's really no clear signal in the climate system right now of what the outcomes are for California. We do see with California, Southern California entering into its dry season. It happens a little sooner than the rest of the state. They are looking for that below normal signature, and that below normal signature kind of extending into what will be in the future, the southwest monsoon, but that's still a little early on this side. As far as our INSO conditions, we are in transition. We've gotten out of La Nina. We're in neutral right now, and all expectations are that when we convene again in the fall, we may be looking at a potential El Nino condition. So stay tuned for that. And with this, I'll hand it over to Jeremy Eric.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Good afternoon, everyone. Jeremy Eric with the Division of Flood Management here at DWR. Today, I'm going to provide a brief update on flood operations from our State Federal Flood Operations Center here in Sacramento. The Flood Center is set up to assist with information collection and dissemination. We're kind of a hub for flood-related information, and we push information out through our forecasting and our high water notification recalls in response to those forecasts, and we also support local flood fighting efforts across the state. The Flood Operations Center was activated starting Thursday, March 9th. We've been activated ever since then to address the high water and the flooding that's been happening across the state due to the heavy precipitation we've seen and some of the low elevation snow melt across California to date. And we do expect to remain activated in the foreseeable future for the spring snow melt that typically begins in April. So as that unfolds, we will remain on the ready and here to work with our local partners. Next slide, please. So here we're taking a look again at the California Nevada River Forecast Center map of the official forecast locations. Not looking as exciting as it did earlier in the month, which we're happy to see a little bit of calming down across many areas across the state. So we're kind of moving away now that it's April from so much of the snow accumulation, and we expect more of the snow melt to begin this month. Currently, there are 2 forecasted locations that are expected to reach flood stage over the next 5 days, and 4 locations expected to be at monitor stage, and these are all within the San Joaquin Valley. The exceptional snowpack and the historic snowpack levels that Mr. Rizzardo spoke to, particularly in the southern Sierra Nevada, will lead to consistent high flows along the San Joaquin River and its tributaries, as well as in the Tulare Lake Basin system throughout the spring and early summer. So we'll keep a close eye on those areas, and we can expect to see these monitor and flood stages kind of fluctuating, but water levels remaining high for the duration of the next few months. In terms of reservoir operations, the reservoir operators over the next several weeks will be maintaining moderate to high releases in anticipation of the exceptionally high snow melt and the inflows that will result from that. Operators have been making room in the reservoirs as they can since the storms earlier in March have passed through. However, that snowmelt runoff will still pose a challenge to managing those reservoir levels and the downstream releases. So DWR here at the Flood Operations Center will continue coordinating with the reservoir operators to best manage the releases and minimize impacts downstream. And we'll be working with the downstream partners on any impacts and concerns that they see. The San Joaquin River near Vernalis is one of the locations, and it's been hovering at or near danger stage for the past 2 weeks, but it is at flood stage now and slowly receding. Again, this location is a representative of some of the higher flows that we see in the San Joaquin, and so we look at that as a key location, and we expect these San Joaquin River levels to remain high through much of the spring and into the early summer. Next slide, please. So in terms of Flood Operations Center activities, we've been actively responding to several levee concerns along the San Joaquin River and its tributaries. In San Joaquin County in particular, RD Reclamation District 2095 had about a 200-foot long waterside erosion that was being monitored and managed at the local level. And that got to a point where we needed to step in and provide some direct assistance from the state. So we're working with our division of engineering, who's managing some emergency erosion repairs there by placing rock along that stretch of levee. In RD 2064, again in San Joaquin County, on the San Joaquin River, there was a seepage site along the right bank of the river, where there was approximately 900 feet of seepage, about 40 feet away from the landside toe of the levee. And we also worked with our division of engineering to manage a contract for emergency repairs there. And so I just want to mention that there's a seepage berm that's being constructed there to help manage some of those seepage flows. Again, these are temporary repairs. They're not intended to be long-term repairs, but they're intended to get through the rest of the flood season in these particular locations. In Merced County, they're in Lower San Joaquin Levee District. There was some wind-driven wave erosion. So there's wave wash protection along the east side bypass that's being implemented using some standard flood fight techniques. In San Joaquin County in particular, the Flood Operations Center has DWR representatives embedded within the county's Office of Emergency Services, and we're providing technical assistance to support San Joaquin County flood response as well as their contingency planning. I'm looking forward into the spring. We will continue deploying flood fight specialists and geotechnical engineers to the region as needed to assess levee threats. That's just an ongoing level of support that we provide, and we'll continue providing as the water remains high in the San Joaquin Valley. Shifting the focus over to the Tulare Lake Basin, just very briefly, as a reminder, maybe the atmospheric river storms in March resulted in heavy precipitation across the Southern Sierra and high snow levels, and this resulted in quite a bit of intense runoff that resulted in widespread flooding, many levee breaches throughout that basin, evacuation orders for some of the downstream communities, and ultimately the deployment of a CAL FIRE incident management team to Tulare County. So the Flood Operations Center is supporting CAL FIRE's operation. We've deployed flood fight specialists and an incident command team who are embedded with CAL FIRE in Tulare County to support some of the advanced planning efforts in the region, as well as providing technical assistance for some of the flood fighting efforts that are ongoing out there. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. Just wanted to throw out some numbers in terms of some of the requests that the Flood Operations Center has fulfilled over the past month with specific flood fight materials and technical assistance. This kind of represents everything that we've deployed over about a dozen counties across the state. So I won't rattle off all these numbers today, but they're here for your reference if you would like to dive in deeper in the details. And with that, that wraps it up for me today. I'll turn it back to Ryan because I forgot to let if there's another presenter.
Thank you. Now we're going to go ahead and open it up to reporter questions. So if you are a credentialed member of the media and you have a question, please go ahead and raise your hand utilizing the hand raise function. We do have Janine Jones, the Interstate Resource Manager at DWR and our de facto drought manager here. And then we also have Patrick Pulapa from the Central Valley Water Quality Control Board. If there are any questions related to water quality in the Central Valley as we experience flood concerns down there. With that, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. Joshua Yeager, you are first. You may unmute.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, just real quick, I wanted to confirm what the data, I guess, was saying, which is that this year's snowpack is tied with 1952 for the largest on record. Is that correct?
Dave,
yeah, this is Dave Rizzardo. Yes, the graphic showed it tied with 1952, and I know this is a little inside baseball, and we like statistics, so we pore over them. But since I don't have all the courses in yet, that number may come and go. So I would hesitate to just label it the highest ever. I think it's going to be on par with it, if not higher, but we do have some snow courses in the north that haven't come in, which are, as Mike showed, we didn't have as wet a season up there. And we have some in the south that didn't come in yet. So as those come in, the percent's going to keep doing this. So that's my only hesitancy. If you want a sound bite, the Southern Sierra is probably the highest ever.
Got it. And that's a good segue to my, I guess, next question, which is, I mean, like you noted, there's a lot of activity here, kind of preparing communities for that snow melt in the Southern Sierra. And I'm just wondering, you know, in your view, how concerned should communities here be in the coming months? And to what extent is the state able and willing to step in when there are apparent conflicts between, say, private companies and flood control districts here, as is going on in Kings County right now, you know, about levees and infrastructure and you know, flood flow diversions. Is that something you can speak to?
I can speak to the first part of the question. I'll defer to others if they want to offer anything for the second. So in terms of the overall concern, yes, I believe there's valid reason to be very concerned given historically what the Lake Basin has seen in terms of flooding in those comparable years, 1983 and 1969 in particular. I have never seen any evidence of what happened in 1952. That's why I speak to the other two. But when we're looking at snowpack that's at or greater than that, I would think it bears logic that the impacts, at least the runoff, is going to be at or above those levels. In fact, Sean de Guzman at the snow survey this morning talked about the April-July runoff, the Bulletin 120 runoff forecast, which he called the snow melt runoff forecast. And he listed in the Kern River, for example, that current forecast is at or above 400% of average. And the Tule and the Kauai are not far behind. So that alone is certainly a reason for concern. How fast that melt or that runoff comes is going to be largely dependent on how warm and how many days of sunny, warm days that we have, starting whether that's April or May or June. And so there's a lot of factors there. And as Dr. Mike Anderson showed, right now the Climate Prediction Center is, you know, really it's unsure which way to go. Is it going to be a warm and dry spring? Is it going to be a cold and wet spring? So that is something that really on a weekly basis, as we get weather forecasts in and better guidance, we'll have a better sense for the rate of runoff. But certainly no holds barred on being vigilant and concerned in terms of the amount of water that we would expect to see coming down. I'll defer to others on the second question.
Brian, I can jump in here a little bit. You know, the Tulare Lake Basin is a highly managed basin. It's a lake bed, so water is going to drain there clearly. But DWR is working with CAL FIRE to support the local flood fight efforts in the region. We'll continue to do so. It is a team effort. It's going to require a lot of collaboration, a lot of cooperation amongst all the flood emergency response agencies, the cities and towns, and some of the private entities that maybe you've mentioned. And that's what the state brings to the table. We're here to support the local efforts and to work toward a collaborative solution to getting through the spring snowmelt season in that region.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next question comes from Haley Smith with the LA Times. You may unmute.
Hi, thanks. First, I just wanted to clarify some numbers. I think we got the numbers from 52 and 83, but I don't know that we got the 1969 number, if you can provide that. And then I also wanted to clarify, Dave, you said the Southern Sierra is probably the highest on record. What other year or years did we come close to this number, 306%?
Yeah, in terms of the 1969 numbers, let me pull that chart up again real quick.
Thanks.
So based on the snow courses, the April 1 in 1969 was 224% of average for the statewide. The way we've been comparing 1969 to this year, because percentages, right, can be based on how many courses were measured and this and that. So we've actually been looking at what the snow water content has been in terms of inches in 1969 based on those snow courses, and what that value is looking like this year. And so the last time we did that calculation over the weekend this year was slightly higher by a half an inch than 1969. So that's why I say probably it is the highest. Again, those numbers will bounce around as we get a few more courses in, but I would feel comfortable in saying it's the highest on the regional level.
In the Southern Sierra?
Yes.
Okay. And then if I may ask one other question, I think for Janine, can you just talk a little bit about what you are all doing to prepare to capture some of this snow melt and water as it comes down?
Well, you probably saw the announcement a couple of weeks ago about the executive order facilitating groundwater recharge. So big effort to try to get as much of that flood water as possible someplace underground, particularly knowing that we have a few months probably in the runoff season to do that. That's the big focus. And of course, that depends on what individual agencies have in the way of infrastructure and capability to do so. You may have also seen that earlier in the season, there was a push by the State Water Resources Control Board and DWR to help agencies prepare and apply to the Water Board for temporary emergency recharge permits. So, trying to encourage people to do as much as they can in this season while we have some extra water to work with.
Thanks.
Next question comes from Ann Mulkern with E&E News. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Karina Nova, live here in the ABC7 newsroom. And once again, you have been getting an update there from the California Department of Water Resources. They conducted their 4th snow survey of the season, a very important one. It's typically the peak of the seasonal snowpack. And what we learned today is that on a statewide average, we're at 237%. That is now one of the largest ever. That brings drought relief, but also flooding concerns. You heard some of that information in that press conference. So we are going to continue to cover this for you. We have a reporter on this story, and we'll bring that to you later on here, ABC7 News. You can watch us on your app. You can watch us online, abc7news.com, or you can watch us on TV, where we'll be on at 3, 4, 5, and 6 this evening with more on this story. For right now, we are going to take you back to regular programming, but again, we'll see you back here later this afternoon. Have a great day.
I'm Dustin Dorsey in Mountain View. You're watching ABC7 Bay Area, streaming live anytime, anywhere. We are where you are. I'm Dustin Dorsey in Mountain View. You're watching ABC 7 Bay Area, streaming live anytime, anywhere. We are where you are. I'm Dustin Dorsey in Mountain View. You're watching ABC 7 Bay Area, streaming live anytime, anywhere. We are where you are.